Floods happen almost every year in America. In March 1997, it was the Ohio River's turn. Here, the flood was forecast, prepared for, and for the most part, controlled.
It really became apparent here by Saturday morning that we were going to have an excessive rainfall event across the Ohio Valley. The heaviest rains being near Louisville and also near Falmouth, Kentucky, and was reaching Cincinnati area probably in the order of 2, 3, 4 in the morning.
The forecasters had known for a month that conditions were ripe for flooding. Now on Saturday, March 13th, it happened. A belt of violent storms traveled right along the line of the river. All the water they produced was caught in the same river basin. The forecasters could only watch as the water level began to rise.
I'm actually placing a call right now to look at the current Cincinnati river gauge data. Basically, we're calling right into the river gauge. Normally, we have it set up to look at it once an hour automatically, but when the river's changing quickly, we can look at it at any time, and that's what I'm doing right now. I want to look at it as it stands right now.
In 48 hours, the Ohio River had risen 28 feet. The Ohio is familiar with floods, and as a result, is extremely well prepared. Along each side of the river are great levees. But the banks flooded, and the river continued to rise.
We wound up by Monday figuring it was going to be probably a Wednesday evening crest, and at about 64.5 feet, and in reality it crested at around 64.7 feet Wednesday evening, about 7 p.m.
So the forecasters gave 3 days warning. They got the timing and the height almost exactly right. Accurate forecasting is important because it can affect the fate of the riverside towns.
Boat 76, we're clear that the only thing we can do is notify EPA. I don't think there's anything anybody can do at this time.
This is New Richmond, just a few miles upriver from Cincinnati. Here there are no levees. Thanks to the forecast, the inhabitants of the town were evacuated before the flood struck. A few whose houses were above the forecast flood risk were able to stay.
Pulled up in a house and had a bunch of kittens meowing inside the house, so we stuck our head in a little tiny hole that was at top, and what I saw were two large cats and a box full of kittens that were forced to the roof by the water.
The floods at New Richmond lasted days. In other areas, by then, the floods had already receded. This is Falmouth, Kentucky. It's on the Licking River, the Ohio tributary where the heaviest rain fell. Here the flood was far worse. 90% of the population had to be evacuated, many of them in the middle of Saturday night. The water rose so suddenly that it was almost a flash flood. It got to 24 feet above flood level in just a few hours. The water left a ruined landscape of wreckage and river sludge. Before anyone could be allowed back, the Army had to check for damage and for bodies.
The only people that are authorized to be in the area is emergency personnel, the fire department, the police, people like that. And we're not letting anybody come in and check their houses because they haven't gone through to make sure they're structurally safe yet.
Every house had to be carefully searched. The task was immense. It was 4 days before the people were allowed back to their homes. they surveyed the devastation left by the flood, the refugees could only wait anxiously and hope they could recover at least something from the ruins. For this couple, that meant trying to salvage what they could from the waterlogged remains of their grandmother's house. Every house in Falmouth had the same story to tell, of devastation and destruction. In this one small town, 4 people died. And the flood affected dozens of towns. Its overall cost was about $300 million. It was the worst flood here for 30 years. 22 people died. Such tragedies are repeated around the world year after year. In 1997, it was Poland's turn for disaster. The waters began to rise in mid-July and simply did not stop. This was probably a 1,000-year flood. That means it was so severe that you could expect one this bad just once in 1,000 years. It engulfed huge tracts of land. At its height, 2,000 square miles of Poland was underwater. And the floods also extended into Austria, Germany, Slovakia, and the Czech Republic. In the confusion spread over the 4 countries, it was difficult to know just how many people had died. Reports put the figures at 60 in Poland and 48 in the Czech Republic. 80 helicopters and 45,000 troops helped with the rescue effort. Such disasters have always been inevitable on our planet, but they may become more powerful and more frequent as global warming begins to bite. Most scientists are now convinced that if the climate is changing, weather patterns around the world will be disturbed. Floods may become more common, more savage, more unpredictable than ever before. The future cost in tragedy and death is impossible to estimate. Scenes such as these will become a little more familiar every year as floods rip across our land. Around the world, sea levels will rise. In Bangladesh, the most threatened country on Earth, 90% of the country is less than 30 feet above sea level. More and more lives will be devastated by the flooding waters of our raging planet.